why he undertook this journey. Now, Galatians chapter 3, verses 13 and 14 is after Malachi. And verse 13 and 14 tells you that Exodus to Malachi has no bearing on what Jesus is fixing to do. Absolutely none. Gosh, for the last 1900 years, the church has been spinning its wheels, rehashing something that was settled 2,000 years ago. And they're still doing it. Retelling the story from Exodus to Malachi. Stop retelling that story and tell me something, tell your people something new. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. Exodus to Malachi. Why? Being made a curse for us. That's why he came. To be made a curse for us. For as it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. That's why he was crucified. Why? Because God put all the sins of this flesh on Jesus 2,000 years ago and made him pay the penalty for all of them, past, present, and future. And he didn't have anything to do with Exodus to Malachi. It has nothing to do with Exodus to Malachi. I know. Now listen, verse 14. Why was Jesus made a curse to redeem us from the law? Excuse me. Why? That the blessing of Abraham, Genesis 12:3, that the blessing of Abraham, Jesus did not come to deal with the Gentile nations based on God's relationship to Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, none of the 12 boys, and none of the prophets from Exodus to Malachi. Jesus came based on God's promise to Abraham 430 years before the law, Mosaic law, Levitical priesthood was given. That's why. Can't annul it. That the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through this fellow named Jesus Christ. This baby born of Mary of Nazareth in Bethlehem. 14, Galatians 3:14, why he came. That the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. I tell my audience, I'm sick of people talking to me about Moses and not saying anything about Abraham. I'm a Gentile. I'm an Abrahamic baby and a Jesus boy. That the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles. Now, I'm not talking about the Jewish people. They have been God's chosen people since Exodus. And from Exodus to Malachi, God is dealing with one family, the family of Isaac and Jacob, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. That's the first that. There's a second that. There's a second that. The first that is that the Gentiles might receive the blessing of Abraham through Jesus, just like the Jewish people, the Israelites, and the Hebrews received the blessing of Abraham through Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the rest of them boys. But there's a second that has nothing to do with Abraham. There's a second that has nothing to do with Abraham. That we might receive the promise, not a blessing, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit of God through faith in His Son, this fellow called Jesus Christ of Nazareth, born in Bethlehem of the Virgin Mary, wrapped in swaddling cloths and was laid in a manger, announced by an angel. So, that the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, and that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. That's the gospel. So, I want to ask you a question. Jesus had a dual citizenship. And if you are one of His, you have a dual citizenship. And if you are not one of His, if you don't have a dual citizenship, you're in trouble. I don't have time to go into the trouble that you're in, but I can tell you where to find it. You can go take a look at the trouble that you're in. It's in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and 11 and 12. That's the problem, that's the trouble that you're in. Because you're without God. And you have no reason to hope. And if you are not in union with Jesus Christ, you don't have God's Holy Spirit, and you don't have a right to eat of the tree of life that God drove Adam and Eve out of the garden from. So, do you have dual citizenship? Now, I have about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm going to say something about this dual citizenship. The Apostle Paul had dual citizenship. God has always used the world to support His plan, His eternal plan. God has always used the world to support His plan. The Apostle Paul, they were going to kill him. You know the story. They were plotting to kill him. But Paul was a Roman citizen.